From the New Arts and Media Studios in River West, the greatest neighborhood in all the world, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. With a general plea today, we've talked about this before, so I promise not to badger you too much, but I want you to think about the things we need here. Mass shootings are a shock to the system every time they happen. They're traumatic. But they're just a small percentage of overall gun deaths, which happen every single day, and a great, great percentage of those gun deaths are suicide. With all the competing research and the statistics that people want to throw around, the one that can't be denied, the one that just jumps out at anybody looking at this objectively, is the more guns you have, the more gun deaths you're going to have. There's just a direct correlation, and there's nothing else to be said. That's just true. I would concede controversy, ignorance even, on a lot of the gun statistics, but not on that one. Nope, not on that one. Speaking of guns, we talked recently about how guns need to be removed from the very idea of policing, that minuscule portion of police calls that actually require a tough guy with an attitude and a gun. That's a very small percentage of what's actually required of cops. People don't like the phrase defund the police, but the fact is we've got to reallocate much of the responsibilities currently put on the shoulders of police and create whole new agencies to handle traffic enforcement, to handle mental health crises, follow up on investigations after the fact, after the crime, not during the crime, all the investigative work. All of those have to be gun-free activities. But I'm not talking just about guns. This is not about guns. Take any of our most pressing issues. The climate crisis. We are absolutely in an emergency situation here, and yet on the list of priorities, it doesn't even make the top 10 usually. Show me the top 10 news stories every day of the news cycle, and the climate crisis is not going to be among the top 10. Let's take a look at the agenda for Congress or for the president. What are they up to today? It's highly unlikely that climate is high on that list. We're not making it the priority that it needs to be. The horrible results of institutional racism. Getting back to the cops for a minute. Every time a cop kills a black person, an unarmed black person, often after something silly like a traffic stop, or for barbecuing in their own backyard, or for whatever ridiculous, arbitrary reason you can find. Also traumatic, and especially for the black community. And all of a sudden we have black mothers and fathers and kids worried about each other and taking special precautions every time they leave the house, every time they get in and out of their car. And despite the rosy scenarios that many economists want to try to sell you, the pre-COVID economy and the post-COVID economy, regardless of exponential growth, some predicting up to 5, 6, 7% growth. We know for a fact that many jobs provide nothing but a bare subsistence. The fact that there still is such a thing as the working poor. Washington cannot find a path to increasing the minimum wage, at least they haven't as I'm speaking. The incredible income gap, the inequality between the haves and the have-nots. I don't remind you of all these things just to be a complainer. I remind you of them because we really need good people. We need good people to step up. And if you consider yourself a good person, I ask you to answer this question. Do you honestly believe that the right wing, politically, of this country is capable of either participating in or even allowing the solutions we need to these problems? I want you to honestly answer that question right now. The right political wing of this country, as we speak, given the opportunity to enact their own policies through legislation, or for that matter, take the other approach, which seems to be pretty popular among the right wing, to refrain from legislating. A lot of folks on the right wing feel it's not their job to make laws, it's only their job to run interference between the private sector and a government who would interfere. So it's all about reducing the power of government. It's all about deregulation. It's all about not passing laws. It's about clearing the way for private enterprise. So that's their solution. I think I'm being fair in my interpretation, aren't I? I don't think I'm coloring this in any way. I think if any of the right-wing thought leaders were beside me right now, they would say, yeah, that's a fair interpretation. But I'm not talking to them. Right now I'm talking to you, a good person. I'm looking for good people today. And I ask again, do you think the right wing, as it's currently constituted, can reduce income inequality, can reduce gun deaths, can reduce the impact of climate change? For the sake of this continuing conversation, I'm going to assume that your answer was no. If it was yes, then I guess you and I have nothing more to say. But my argument right now is for good people who can see the simple truth. Right-wingers do not have the solutions to our problems. If you answered yes to my question, that yes, the right wing has the appropriate solutions and we should adhere to them, that's fine. You can continue listening, but you're not going to be happy. So let's say you answered no to that question. No, the right wing is not the approach. All right. The next question then is, do you think some sort of compromise between the left and the right wing, as I've described it? And a reminder here, I haven't even mentioned the January 6th insurrectionists. I haven't mentioned QAnon. I haven't mentioned the very hard right Ayn Rand type libertarians. I mean, because they're around too. And they very much define the right wing today. I mean, I feel I've described the right wing pretty generously, actually. So you've answered no to the first question. Let me ask you now the next question. Do you think a compromise, a give and take, finding middle ground principles between the left and the right, as I've described them, do you think that will get us where we need to go? Middle ground policies. Middle ground compromise between the right as it currently exists and the left as it currently exists. Let me take a little sidebar and define how the left currently exists. Okay, the left. There are some progressives in leadership and government. We're thinking of people like Pramila Jayapal, Alida Rashid, Bernie, AOC. That's the left I'm talking about. That's about as far left as we go in this country, currently. So my question to you is, again, middle ground principles, compromise, meeting halfway between the current left, as I've described them, and the current right, as I've described them. Will that solve the problems that need to be solved? And hopefully in a timely manner. I don't know how much longer we can postpone climate solutions. I don't know how much longer we can tolerate income inequality at the current numbers. Half the people in this country living paycheck to paycheck, one unexpected bill, a health emergency, a car breaks down, any one single unexpected expense, and half the families in this country or more will spin into financial crisis. I don't know how much longer we can tell black folks to say, well, we're working on it. We're going to try to get the cops not to kill you anymore. I don't know how many more victims of mass shootings we can say, oh, well, we're working on a compromise. So if you believe that this middle ground is the answer, then you also have to ask the question, well, on what timeline is that solution going to come? Gun deaths, considered a major health crisis by the medical community. Still tens of millions of people uninsured or underinsured who face health-related bankruptcy or even death by the tens of thousands every year. So again, I'm not here just to be a Debbie Downer. I'm not here just to depress you. I'm asking you a question. Do you believe that the middle ground between today's left and today's right will solve these problems And if so, will they solve them in a timely way? Now, you may have some nuance to your answer. Maybe you think, well, in the area of guns, yes. In the area of healthcare, no. In the area of education, yes. In the area of income inequality, no. I don't know. Maybe you have some nuance to your answer. But just for the sake of our argument here, I'm really asking you a yes or no question. Is a middle path between today's left and today's right the correct path for us to go down? All right. Some of you answered yes. Once again, you can continue to listen. You're welcome to listen, but you're not going to like the rest of this conversation because the correct answer is no. Of course, the correct answer is no, because any honest look at history will reveal the proverbial pendulum. We swung a little bit left with the New Deal. We swung a little bit left with LBJ's Great Society. We swung pretty far right, going back to Hoover and then thinking of Ronald Reagan and the last couple of Republican presidents. Lots of deregulation, lots of tax cuts for the rich folks. And here we are, as we speak, with colossal problems, colossal inequality, inexcusable, unnecessary suffering through poverty, health crisis, preventable death. Look me in the eye and tell me that the middle way between left and right has ever solved anything, or will ever solve anything. So I'm looking for good people today. We need the actions of good people. Financial hardships, job insecurities, health crises, gun violence, wage and class stagnation. It's all been our story here now, going on decades and decades. So if your answer to my second question was no, the middle path is not the way, then that obviously leads me to my next question. Well, then what is the way? Well, obviously, to embrace the left. And here's my next question to good people. What are you doing about it? Do you feel any responsibility here? Is it enough to feel bad? Is it enough to shed tears at each shooting, at each murder? Is it enough to share nasty memes about your political enemies? Is it enough to laugh knowingly and nod your head along with the late-night host, really giving it to the right wing? Good people. It is my contention that that's where we are right now. That's the state of things right now. We have too many good people. Millions and millions of Americans are good people not willing to do what is required. And what is required is to completely eliminate, to purge the current right wing. Because either through their own power of policy and legislation, or through strategies of compromising with the right wing, both of these solutions take us down the wrong path. Right-wingers alone would take us to full and complete inequality, environmental degradation, more death and destruction at the hands of guns, more racism, more institutional racism allowed, even celebrated. But that middle path, that compromise path, is every bit as deadly. Maybe it slows down the process a little bit. Maybe we get there just a little bit more slowly. Maybe rising sea levels won't swallow up Florida in 10 years or 20 years. Maybe it'll take 30 or 40. By going the middle way, we're only delaying the inevitable. We're only inviting ultimate disaster on every front that we face. Make the counter argument. How in anyone's imagination can compromise with the right result in any meaningful, productive change that this country requires? I don't know how you can make that argument. Make it. Please make it right now and tell me. So, if so far you're in agreement with me, then we have no choice. The right must be purged. But every time you compromise with the right, every time you look for that middle ground, you're giving them comfort. You're giving them quarter. You are protecting and enabling the furthest reaches of America's right wing every time you compromise with them. There can be no more compromising. There is no middle path. So if relying on the right gets us a big no, if relying on the middle path gets us a big no, what gets us to a yes? We don't have a choice anymore. This country, the United States of America, the last holdout in all of the so-called civilized world, must go left in a real and meaningful way. Good people, I'm looking at you. You have a good heart. You look at racism, you look at gun violence, you look at health and economic inequities, and you want to do the right thing. You believe that there's injustice in the world, but you're not yet willing to do what's needed. In every election, local, state, and feds, you got to go left. You got to go hard left. Every time you vote for that centrist, every time you vote for that moderate, even with the very best intentions, again, you have all the right ideas. You have a heart of gold. You want equality for everyone. You want opportunity for everyone. You want no one to face violence or fear. You want all the right things. You're a good person. And yet you walk into that voting booth and you vote for centrists and moderates. And I'm telling you, moderates and centrists, by very definition, are there to compromise with the right, and therefore enable the right, and therefore stop us from ever hoping to achieve the goals we all hope for. Obviously, you can't vote right, and if you're a listener to this program, I assume you're not voting right. But I'm here to tell you, you cannot continue to vote centrist, to vote moderate. We got to turn this big ship. And the only way to do it is to go hard left every time you vote. So far, good people have been afraid to do this. There has been progress. We have Cori Bush out of St. Louis. We got a couple of genuine progressives on the coasts in California and in New York. We got people trying to push the president to the left, with mixed success, to say the least. There are also the very obvious points that I won't spend too much time on. You got to vote with your feet. You got to vote with your wallet. You got to be consistent with your ideals. That's the other thing. Oh, it's terrible what the big corporations are doing. It's terrible that that Amazon busted the union in Alabama. And yet there you are on your computer. Some of you, I'm not saying it's you. Too many people. Too many good people are getting those Amazon deliveries at their front door every other day. We want the right things. We laugh at the right late-night comedians. And yet we conduct our lives in such a way as to perpetuate the systems that uphold and maintain all the unfairness, all the inequity. Where you work, where you shop, what you drive, every decision you make. I'm looking for good people today. I'm looking for good people, and I'm imploring you, I'm begging you to take direct action that reflects your principles. I don't know, maybe these good people are doing it unwittingly. Maybe there's a little cognitive dissonance going on. Maybe there's some rationalizing. They just don't want to face it. But good people who want the right things are the very people, by the millions, who are upholding the systems that are keeping us down. Corporate, capitalist, financial systems that uphold and even accelerate inequality. Gun violence, racism, police brutality. Without a direct connection between your ideals and the way you live your life and the way you vote, well, your opinions are worth nothing. Your tears are crocodile tears. You're a good person. You wouldn't hurt a fly. And yet so many of us refuse. We just somehow are unable to make these connections. How I live, how I work, how I consume, and how I vote. There's currently no left in this country. It doesn't exist. The farthest left we go, the people I mentioned, Pramila Jayapal, AOC, Bernie, on any standard objective scale, relative to the rest of the world, they're just sort of left of center. There's no actual left. There are no anarchists. There are no socialists. There's no real left in this country represented in government or in the media. And good people are scared. They're scared of the real left, the actual left. They're frightened of allowing actual anarchists, socialists, labor union activists. Good people are afraid of the real left. And so they cling to this comfortable center, not knowing or not willing to face the fact that they are enabling, by their cling to the center, they are enabling the very deadly right wing. Good people who are moderates, good people who are centrists, the right wing couldn't exist. It would fall off the map into the pages of history, if not for centrists and moderates propping them up. Let's give you a little visual here. Let's do a little seesaw action here, a little teeter-totter, as we used to call it. There's the big old fat right wing on one end of the teeter-totter. There's Bernie and AOC and Pramila Jayapal and a handful of others sitting on the seesaw just left of the midway bar. And then everybody else, the Tim Kaines and the Joe Bidens and the Nancy Pelosi's and the Chuck Schumers, they're all somewhere in between. A little bit center, a little bit right of center, a little bit further. And you got your Joe Manchin, who's practically down there on the far right with the conservatives. So that's your seesaw. And on the left end of that teeter-totter, well, of course, that represents the non-existent left. And that's our precarious situation today. That's where we are. Yeah, we have the so-called American left sitting just left of center. We've got the so-called liberals or moderates, best exemplified by Joe Biden. And then we've got Manchin and the entire right-wing conservative Republican movement. And we're completely weighted down on one end, where no solutions will ever be found. So let's bring this back to good people. Good people, I'm asking you, reject the right wing, reject the center, go left. It's the only way to correct this unacceptable imbalance. We got to push the right wing off onto the grass, off of this seesaw. With each election cycle and with each decision you make every day about the way you work, where you work, how you consume, what you teach your kids, we start to fill in that missing left. Good people are afraid. But I'm telling you, without you, it'll never happen. Without good people making the correct decision to go left, we're just doomed. I'm looking for good people today. And I've entertained these ideas on other episodes of this podcast, so a lot of this isn't new to you. Especially the idea of political diversity. I'll repeat this because I want to make sure you know that I think the political spectrum should reflect diversity. There should be a left and a right and everything in between. There should be hearty debate. There should be checks and balances. All of that I agree with. But there is an acceptable spectrum. Do you think there should be Nazis on this acceptable spectrum? Do you think there should be white supremacists on this spectrum? Now, an extreme freedom of speech person might say, well, yes, they should be represented. Freedom of speech. Well, actually, I'm going to agree with you there. I'm going to agree with you. I, too, believe in freedom of speech. I don't believe in freedom of power. I think if Nazis and white supremacists take hold enough to enact legislation or be obstructionist and prevent good legislation, I think it is absolutely within our rights and our duties to do everything we can to purge these people from power. And that's what I'm talking about. That's what this seesaw is. It's all about power. So don't confuse this with freedom of speech. Yeah, we got some nutball fringe that wants to advocate for white supremacy and Nazis and the whole thing. Yeah, I believe in freedom of speech. But freedom of speech doesn't automatically include shared power. No. The shared power of a political spectrum is not absolute. It's not indefinite. No, it's not. There's nothing un-American, there's nothing undemocratic about defining the acceptable spectrum. And in my considered opinion, the now missing left on the American spectrum needs to be filled in and hold some power. The farthest acceptable right, I would think, would be the Joe Bidens and the Joe Manchins of the world. There might be one or two moderate Republicans on the field today, though I'm not sure about that. As I've said many times, I'm not sure how anyone puts an R next to their name these days, knowing what the party has been capable of here in the last couple decades. But the point remains, a diverse spectrum with right and left. Absolutely. I'm absolutely fine with that. Everybody make their arguments. Hash it out. See who wins, see who loses, face the consequences. That's the way the world ought to work. In contrast to what we have today, where the world is not working. Problems are entrenched. The big ones I've been talking about: climate crisis, income inequality, racism. Problems are entrenched. The right wing not only has no solutions, if they had it their way, things would be much, much worse. And the so-called centrists and moderates, by their very presence, are enabling the right wing to remain on the spectrum. So that's my argument for going left. We have to go left. In our personal lives, in the voting booth, we have to go left and left and left again until the spectrum makes some sense and the resulting laws of the land make sense. And for the first time in many, many decades, we can make some headway toward the solutions we need. And what we need more than anything else in this world is for good people to abandon the center that enables the right. Abandon the center and take a hard left. Good people. Do the right thing. Let me take the final minute here to remind you, you can hear this episode and all episodes of The Log wherever you get your podcasts. I always encourage you to go to the website, charlesburcell.com. That's where you're going to find all the links, everything you need, including all the other titles we've done. We've done some other podcasts over the years that are kind of fun. You can also contact me there or on Facebook or Twitter. Thanks very much to our flagship terrestrial station, Riverwest Radio, riverwestradio.com. Our theme song is composed and performed by Peter Donalds. All right, there it is. I hope this finds you well, and I hope you'll get out there and fight the good fight every day. I love you. I'm Charles Burcell.